In this video, we're going to find the cost, the markup, the selling price, or the percent of markup when the percent of markup is based on the selling price. In the previous section, we did the same type of problems, but in that section, we were basing our markup on cost, so the problems are a little bit different. And then we'll compare the markup based on cost with the markup based on selling price. In the previous section, the markup was based on cost, so the rate of the cost was always 100%. In this section, the markup is going to be based on selling price, so the selling price is always going to be 100%. Here's an example. We have a calculator that costs $5 and sells for $10. Find the rate of markup based on the selling price. So notice in our chart that 100% is the rate of the selling price. If the cost is $5 and we sell it for $10, then we can easily figure out that the markup is $5. The rate of the markup, if it's based on selling price, would be 5 out of $10 or a 50% markup. And the column always has to add to 100%, so we have 50 here as well. If we know the selling price rate is 100% and we know the markup percent, then we can subtract those two and find the cost percent. So the markup amount is the difference between the selling price and the cost, and that's the same as it was in the previous section. So the calculator costs $5, it sells for $10. The rate of markup based on selling price was 50%, simply 5 divided by 10, and that decimal changed to a percent. Here's another example. Find the amount of markup and the percent of markup based on selling price for the following items. We have a dog collar which costs $4 and sells for $10. So our markup is going to be the $10 minus the $4, which is $6. And the percent of markup based on selling price would just be that $6 divided by the selling price this time. When we want to do rate of markup based on cost, then we put cost on the bottom. If we're basing it on selling price, we put selling price on the bottom. And that should give us a 60% increase. A notebook which costs $1.25 and sells for $2. Again, we're just going to subtract to find the amount of the markup. And to find the percent of the markup, we simply take that amount and divide it by the selling price because we're now doing markup rates based on selling price. So we get 75 cents is the amount of the markup, and that represents a 37.5% markup. If we're doing markup based on selling price and we know the markup percent, then we can simply subtract that markup rate from 100, and that'll give us the cost rate. So subtract the percent of markup from the 100 to obtain the rate of the cost, and then divide the markup by the rate of the markup based on selling price. So our markup is $5. We have a 20% markup based on selling price, so we're going to divide the $5 by the 0.2 and get that the selling price is $25, and we can subtract the markup dollar amount from the $25 and find out that the cost was $20. This formula gives us cost when we know markup, dollar amount, and the rate of the markup based on the selling price. Another example, to find the selling price when we know the amount of markup based on selling price. We have a cell phone. It's been marked up $50 and the rate of markup is 33%, so we can take the $50, divide it by the 33% in decimal form, and we will find out that the cell phone cost $151.52 when rounded. A pair of socks which has been marked up $3 and it has a markup rate of 60%. So if I want to know the selling price, then I take the $3 markup and divide it by the rate of the markup, which is 0.60, and that gives me a cost of $5. Subtract the rate of markup from 100% to determine the rate of cost, and then we can find the selling price by taking the cost divided by the rate of the cost based on selling price. So find the selling price and markup for a pair of jeans which costs the retailer $28 and has a markup based on selling price of 30%. So here they're giving us the cost of $28 and markup based on selling price is 30%. So in the previous problems they were giving us the dollar markup. Now they're giving us the dollar amount of the cost. So if these jeans cost $28 and that represents a 30% markup, then the rate for the cost would be 70%. The selling price is equal to cost divided by the rate of the cost. So the cost was $28, and the rate of the cost we figured out was 70%. And when we do that division, we get a selling price of $40, which means the markup was $12. Find the selling price with the amount of markup based on selling price for the following items. So again, they're giving us cost, and they're giving us the rate of the markup. So we need to find the complement of the rate of the markup in order to get the rate of the cost. So if the markup percent is 60, then the cost percent is 40%. So we're going to take 2 divided by 40% in decimal form, get $5 for the selling price, and if $5 is the selling price and $2 was the cost, then the markup must be 5 minus 2, or $3. The next problem, a box of gourmet chocolates that costs $8 a box and is marked up 75%. If the markup rate is 75%, the cost rate is 25%, so we're going to take the cost dollars and divide it by the cost rate, and that will give us the selling price of $32. And if we want the actual amount of markup, then we take the $32 selling price minus the $8 cost, and that's where we get the $24. Subtract the rate of markup from the rate of the selling price to determine the rate of cost. We've already been doing that. And then the cost is going to equal the rate of the cost times the selling price. So in these problems, we're going to use the rate of the cost times the selling price to figure out what the cost was. The previous problem, they gave us the cost. Now we're going to determine the cost. They gave us the selling price. We know that's 100% because we're working costs based on selling price. So the rate for the cost up here is 75%. And if we know the selling price and we know that the markup based on selling price is 25%, then we can take $3, the selling price, times the markup based on selling price, which is 25%, and find the markup, or we can go straight to the cost and take $3 times 75% and find that the cost is $2.25 and the markup would be $3 minus $2.25. Just as I was saying before, you could take the $3 times the 25%, and that's going to give you the markup amount directly, and then you could subtract the selling price minus the markup and get the cost. So you can do that problem either direction. Find the markup based on cost and the markup based on selling price of a computer that costs $1,500 and sells for $2,000. So this is a side-by-side problem. This was the previous section where we did markup based on cost, and I know that because the cost is 100%. The one on the right is markup based on selling price, and I know that because that is 100%. So concentrating on the left side here, if the markup is going to be based on the cost and the markup is $500, to find that percent markup is 500 divided by the $1,500, which is going to give us a 33% markup. It's a 1/3, 500 divided by 1,500, so 33.333, and we will of course round that off. Doing the markup based on selling price over here, I'm going to take the 500 and divide it by 2,000 because my base is selling price. So when I do 500 divided by 2,000, then I get a 25% markup based on selling price. The reason you don't get the same thing when you base it on cost and you base it on selling price, the rates are going to come out different because the bases are different. One problem uses cost as the base, and we know that because of the 100% here, and one uses selling price. Okay, if you understand markup based on selling price, you may stop this video and use the password markup to access the quiz. If you don't quite have it yet, then there are a few more examples that follow. Find the missing numbers in the table if the markup is based on cost. So we have markup based on cost, and the markup is 100%, and we know when we do markup based on cost, that's always 100%. So this rate here is 200%. So if I'm going to mark up this item 100% based on cost, then 100% is going to give me a markup of $41 because 100% really just means I'm doubling the price. So my selling price would be $82. Here are all the steps worked out. You can pause that and look through those if you need to study that in more detail. In this problem, we're doing markup based on selling price. So we know the 100% goes here, and this must be 85% because we subtract the 15% to find out what the markup based on cost is. So we know the markup amount is $8, and that is a 15% markup. So if we divide $8.15, we will get a selling price of $53.33. And then if we subtract those, the 53.33 minus 8, we'll get the 45.33. This is a table where they give us, it's actually two different problems here. The first row is the first problem. They give us the cost of $1.56 and the selling price, and we're supposed to fill in these other items. So markup is easy. You just take $2 minus $1.46, and we'll get 44 cents. And then the rate of markup based on cost. So that 44 cents represents what percent of the cost? So we do 0.44 divided by 1.56. And that's going to give us our percent or rate of markup based on cost, which is 28.21%, and it tells us round to the nearest hundredth. So 28.21%. And if we do rate of markup based on the selling price, then we still take the markup, which is 44 cents, but we're going to base it on the selling price, so we're going to divide by 2 this time. On the second problem, they give us the selling price and they give us the rate of markup based on cost. So that means the selling price is 250% of the cost. So 250% times the cost would give us that 124. So to find the actual cost, we'll take the 124 and divide it by 2.5, not 1.5, but 2.5 to get $49.60. And when we subtract that from 124, we get 74.40. And we can use that to find the markup based on selling price. Divide that by the selling price. And the markup based on selling price is 60%. And these next slides show you the detail for those two problems if you need to study the steps in greater depth. We have a briefcase that's marked up $15.30, which is 30% of the selling price. Find the selling price of the briefcase. So pause the tape and see if you can work that out, and then look at the solution, which follows. Find the cost. Once you know the $51, then it's easy to just subtract. A desk organizer sells for $35, which includes a markup rate of 60% based on selling price. Find the markup. So we just take 60% of the $35, and that's going to give us $21. Find the cost. That's just going to be the $35 minus the $21.